Hey guys, how you guys doing? Recently, I feel like Japan is too romanticized. And in this video, I want to talk about why I think that's the case and what's the reality. The real reality of living as an Indian in Japan. So I'll be touching on topics like racism, xenophobia, the boom of tourism in Japan, and the rise of third culture kids. So I was interviewed on this topic by Takashi from Japan 2 years ago, and it kind of went viral. But I do think that I couldn't dive into it as much as I wanted to. So in this video, I'm gonna dig deep. So first thing is, in a country where a majority of the population is homogeneous, meaning that the population of immigrants is of a minority. So in Japan, as of 2026, there is only a 3% population of immigrants, foreigners in Japan. That's tiny if you compare it to countries like US or UK. So in a country that's very homogeneous, or anyone who looks like me, looks different, is always going to stand out, no matter what you do. And it's a true challenge to fit in, no matter how long you live in Japan and how well you know the country, the culture, and the customs. And I've faced several instances of microaggressions in my time here, and I want to shed some light on that, on these with you. So I'm here to give the real tea. But before I dive into this, I want to give a bit of context about my background. So I was born and brought up in Japan. I lived almost the entirety of my life here. And if you compare this to immigrants in other countries like the US or UK, which are known for their diversity, these immigrants are considered Americans, right? They identify as Chinese Americans, Korean Americans, Japanese, Latin Americans, and Indian Americans, and more. So similarly, when I introduce myself, I now say, oh, I'm Indian Japanese, but people can't seem to wrap their head around it. But I mean, why shouldn't the same principle apply? So despite living almost all my life here, I still get looks in the train or on the street when I'm walking, and it's especially in the areas which are less touristy or where there's less foreigners living there. But Japan is my home, so to me, I feel no different than any other average Japanese living here. Now, of course, my upbringing is a bit different. My parents are Indian, I have Indian roots, I grew up in Indian culture, eating Indian food, watching Bollywood movies. I self-taught myself Bollywood dance. I even learned Bharatanatyam, which is a traditional South Indian form of dance. So I didn't attend a Japanese public school, which is normally the case for the average Japanese. I was exposed to a variety of different cultures, especially Korean culture, Filipino culture, Chinese culture, and a lot more. And I also studied abroad in England for 3 years. So yeah, I don't have the ordinary upbringing of the average Japanese, but I don't think it makes me any less Japanese. Japanese customs, traditions, mannerisms are just a part of me. I speak and write Japanese, read Japanese. I love Japanese culture, music, anime, food, not to mention I have a Japanese passport. So how does this make me any different to the average Japanese? Now, there are two personal incidents I want to highlight and stand out to me that I want to share. So the first incident happened just a year ago, and I was signing up for a dance studio in Shibuya, and the receptionist there, I realized early on that she was a newbie. I wanted to register for the studio, and mind you, there are different registration and tickets you have to buy, one for locals, one for foreigners. And I told her that I want to register for the local one because I live here, but it was pretty clear she didn't know how to do this. So she called someone else and explained the situation to them in Japanese, and of course I understand. And then right in the middle, she says, 外国人が, and I immediately feel this rush of heat up through my head, and I was so triggered. She had just called me a foreigner, blatantly labeled me as an outsider, othered me, and I know that this probably came from a place of ignorance, but I felt so angry and hurt because I was Japanese. I consider myself Japanese. And she knew nothing about me, instantly labeled me as a foreigner just because how I looked and my skin color. It was an indirect form of othering, and proof that she held an unconscious bias towards me. And like I said, I know it came from a place of ignorance, but it's a harmful and prejudiced assumption to make about someone, especially when you know nothing about them and are speaking Japanese. So the second incident happened a few months later when I was having a call with an English prep academy or school, and I was calling to ask about the jobs there, and the first person who picked up was a Japanese man, and I asked him about the job position there and how I could apply. I wanted to apply directly through the website, but there was no kind of process listed on the website. But I don't know, the guy was confused. I assumed he was, because he then asked me if I got to know the job through Gaijin Plot, which is a third-party job website, especially for foreigners. But I told him that I hadn't found them through that website, and I then just asked him about available jobs and how I could apply. And then all of a sudden he passes the phone to an English-speaking woman, and the first thing she asked me is what's my name. I say Safiani, and then what would follow would be an immediately red flag. See, she asked me, where are you from? And at first glance, it may appear an innocent, innocuous question. But when I told them I was from Japan, she couldn't believe me. No, she couldn't believe me. And she was like, oh, but that's not a Japanese name. And I instantly felt this rush of heat. Again, instantly triggered. And I just answered with a simple yes. But she was not having it. She was like, oh, so you can speak Japanese? And I was like, yeah. I was speaking with the other Japanese guy in Japanese. And yeah, and I just did not understand why that guy passed the phone to her. It just really pissed me off. And then she kept asking a series of questions about where I'm from and who I am and my background and all of that. Like, I can't remember exactly what the questions were because I just didn't want to remember. But it just kept triggering me and raising the red flags, more red flags. Then I realized I definitely don't want to work here. So I cut the call. So if there's anything I realized through these experiences, it's that language is a big discriminator. I may not speak Japanese like a native, but I am still fluent in it. I speak it fluently, I can write and read. And precisely because of this though, or if I make any mistake, I sometimes had the experience where I was talked down to and immediately typed as a foreigner. But you know, if you would reverse the situation, if Japanese was learning English and trying to speak English to me and they made a mistake, I wouldn't talk down to them, would I? I wouldn't do that. So this has happened several times to me, and it's not all the time, but it's happened for sure. And it's really got me thinking that language is an integral key part of an identity, of what makes someone who they are, whether that's Japanese, Chinese, Korean, Indian, Pakistani, you name it. At least I think that's what most people attribute to what makes you whatever nationality. And if you speak Japanese fluently like a native, you're immediately considered a native. And it doesn't have to be Japanese, like any other language. So I've been thinking to myself recently, what makes someone Japanese other than language? Is it only the fact that you speak Japanese? But obviously not. I mean, Japanese customs, courtesy, politeness, traditions, I think those are all part of what makes someone Japanese, or a Japanese. And Japanese are very considerate of other people's spaces. They show respect to others. They bow a lot. And I think all these customs are what make them who they are. And it's already a cool part of me. And then there comes the Japanese festivities, like celebrating Nenmatsu, which is Japanese New Year. And that's probably the biggest festival of Japanese culture. And traditions like eating toshikoshi soba, or zenzai, which is a sweet azuki red bean soup with mochi. It's hot usually, so good. And then going to the temple, and so there are different multiple components of what makes someone Japanese, what makes up their identity. But unfortunately, I think some people like to only see what they want to see, with their own prejudices and assumptions about who can be Japanese, who can be Indian. And that's the reality. Now, I think it's interesting to compare Japan to other countries in the West, like the US or UK, because of their human geography, which is the total opposite. So, where Japan is almost entirely homogeneous, given that it is an island that's quite isolated from the rest of the world, and they've had a history of isolation. US and UK are countries where there are histories of large migrations from other countries, which primarily were because their home countries became unsafe due to civil conflict, corrupt governments, and other conflicts. So now there are large populations of immigrants in the UK, from India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Nigeria, Romania, Ireland, and then in the US, China, Mexico, India. And there could be more. There are more, probably. And these countries are known for their cultural diversity, or multiculturalism. Yet, ironically enough, racism still exists in these countries. Systematic discrimination occurring on a daily basis. And these cases usually play out quite overtly, and they're explicit instances of these, especially in the US and the UK. And these can be anything from visa and immigration processes, and recent difficulties in fresh graduates, or foreigners obtaining and renewing visas, especially with the skilled worker visa in the UK, where they recently raised the minimum salary to be £42,000, which is almost impossible for any fresh graduate to obtain. And then there are the peaceful public protests in relation to immigration that have been shut down by the police, and are not peaceful. Outright harassment of immigrants, disparity in incarceration rates, access to healthcare and education. But in Japan, racism takes on a different form. It's quieter, it's more subtle, but it definitely exists, and it hurts. And usually it comes from a place of ignorance or prejudiced assumptions, from landlords refusing to rent out to non-Japanese tenants, employers rejecting applicants just because they're non-Japanese based on their nationality. The constant social distancing from us foreigners. So it can be really hard for foreigners to be accepted into social circles or communities, or may take a really long time, even for long-term residents like me. And foreigners often struggle with opening bank accounts, obtaining credit cards, or... And then there is a term called hafu here, which is a term coined for children or anyone whose parents or one of their parents is from Japan and the other from a non-Japanese foreign country. So they're called hafu. And these children are a big target of bullying in Japanese public schools. And they face their own unique challenges in finding their own sense of belonging and identity. So, aside from these instances, Japanese always seem to be constantly surprised if a foreigner or someone who looks different can speak Japanese. And in that way, long-term residents or people born in Japan are constantly othered. Not to mention being asked where you're from, even if you tell them that you are Japanese and they persist to ask you where you're really from to get the answer they want, is a clear form of microaggression. They just want to hear what they want to hear. And finally, interestingly enough, I think common parallel between Asia and the West in terms of discrimination is that language discrimination happens almost anywhere. You're immediately judged based on how you speak, the accent, dialect, and how well you speak the language. Now, we of course can't talk about racism in Japan without talking about the recent boom of tourism. And there has almost been a 47% increase in tourists between 2023 and 2024 due to weak currency of yen, and it was also a goal for the Japanese government to push forward and boost the tourism industry. But because of that now, where there were previously quiet areas with no tourists, they are quickly becoming overpopulated and overcrowded, so much so that it's obstructing their way of life for locals who take public transportation. Sorry guys, it's so bright over here, so ignore that. Yeah, so there's a particular incident that I want to highlight that happened 3 months ago in 2025. And this was when I was filming a dance video with my friend, who's a videographer, and we were filming in one of the back alleys of Shibuya, which is quite like run down, where all the bars were, and the street was full of graffiti. So I was dancing in one of the flat areas of the stairs, and this man was watering his plants on the side. And then whilst I'm dancing, he moves his hose towards me. And I look at him and I'm like, are you doing this on purpose? And then I sidestep and I'm like, okay, he definitely is. And then a minute passes. A minute later, this other woman comes out and then starts yelling at us, speaking with us angrily. Like, she's like, oh, can't you see people like you are filming videos keep coming here and drawing graffiti on these walls? All these skaters come here and, you know, skate down here, take videos, and more people come. And she kept going on and on about this in Japanese. And I told her that we have nothing to do with that. Why are you blaming us for that? But she was not having it, and she was already upset and made up her mind. So, you know, nothing we say wouldn't have any effect. She clearly had her own assumptions about us foreigners, and if there's anything I've gathered from this incident is that the boom of tourism is exacerbating the already existing xenophobia in Japan, as more and more people protest against letting immigrants in and letting foreigners in. That's unfortunate truth. Okay, coming to the end of the video, I just want to say a couple of things. If there's anything I realized from living in Japan for a long time, it's that change is slow in Japan, and some things may change, but some things may never change. I get less stares and looks than I would have years ago, or maybe it's the fact that I've just stopped caring what people think and noticing. But I think now more than ever, there's a need to recognize and acknowledge the identity of third culture kids. So these are people who have grown up in different parts of the world or exposed to different cultures and identify with these different cultures, and I really identify with that. And there's another term that I kind of coined, which is liminal identity. So someone with a liminal identity is someone who's in between spaces, in between cultures, in between worlds. And I really identify with that, being someone who's grown up with Indian culture and Japanese culture, and I'm always hovering between the two worlds. And I'm not half of this or half of that. I am both of these. So I feel like I'm always in between. So why don't we start using the term liminal identity? Why not? I think it's about time we start changing the way we think about identity. Let me know if you agree in the comments down below. And see you next time. Bye.